The city had stopped breathing 3 weeks ago. Lieutenant Commander Jake Brennan pressed his back against charred concrete, feeling the November cold seep through Kevlar. Snow fell in curtains thick enough to choke sound. What used to be downtown Kharkov was now a graveyard of twisted steel and shattered glass towers gutted by fire, vehicles frozen mid-evacuation, windows gaping like eye sockets. His 8-man SEAL team had moved through the industrial district at 0400, tasked with reconnaissance of enemy supply lines. Clean in, clean out, 48 hours, maximum exposure. The ambush hit them at 0623. First shot punched through Petty Officer Torres's shoulder before anyone registered the crack. Second and third rounds sparked off the armored Humvee. By the fourth, Brennan had his team scattered across the plaza, seeking cover that barely existed. "Sniper! 11 o'clock high!" Chief Martinez shouted, his voice swallowed by wind. Brennan scanned the skeletal apartment blocks. 4 shooter positions, elevated, overlapping fields of fire. The kind of setup that required days of preparation. They'd been expected. His radio crackled. "Overwatch 1, this is Hawk 6. UAV feed is scrambled. Repeat, we are blind up here." Perfect. No air support, no surveillance, and a storm front that made extraction impossible for at least 6 hours. Brennan watched Torres press gauze against his shoulder, watched blood darken the snow beneath him. "We move east," Brennan ordered. 3-block displacement. Use the send. A rocket-propelled grenade screamed past, detonating against a burnt-out bus 30 meters away. Shrapnel hissed through the air. The message was clear. Every escape route had been calculated, anticipated, denied. "Sir," that was Lieutenant Reed, youngest on the team, his voice tight. "They're boxing us in." Brennan knew. He'd walked into a kill zone designed by someone who understood how Americans thought, how SEALs moved. The enemy wasn't just shooting, they were hurting. Another round cracked past his head, close enough to feel the displacement. He counted muzzle flashes. 8 hostile shooters, minimum. His team was bleeding, pinned, and the snow kept falling, erasing their footprints, their options, their time. That's when he saw her. Movement in a collapsed office building, 40 meters north. At first he thought it was a hostile, but the silhouette was wrong, smaller, deliberate. A figure knelt by a shattered window, and in her hands was a rifle that made his breath catch. Barrett M82A1, 50 caliber anti-materiel rifle. In civilian terms, a weapon designed to destroy vehicles from a mile away. She wore no uniform, he recognized. Dark jacket, no insignia, face obscured by a scarf. But what froze him wasn't her appearance, it was what she was doing. She was cleaning the rifle, not frantically, not ducking incoming fire. She worked with the methodical precision of someone maintaining equipment in a quiet armory, not a battlefield where rounds snapped overhead every 3 seconds. Brennan's training screamed at him. Attached asset? Some agency operator they'd failed to brief him about? He'd received no notification of support personnel, no grid coordinates for friendly snipers. "Chief," he hissed into his radio. "North building, 3rd floor. You see her?" Martinez's scope swept across. "Jesus, who is that?" The woman adjusted the rifle's bipod, checked the scope, then settled into position. The Barrett's barrel was nearly 4 feet long, the weapon itself weighing 30 pounds. She handled it like an extension of her body. Brennan saw something else, numbers etched faintly on the stock. Even through his scope, he could make them out. 3,247. Not a serial number, too deliberate, too specific. What the hell did 3,247 mean? Another SEAL called out, taking fire from the West Tower. But Brennan couldn't look away from the woman. She'd become perfectly still, a statue amid chaos. Then, without turning her head, she spoke into a radio clipped to her collar. Her voice carried somehow, cutting through wind and gunfire. "Send me wind data." Her name wasn't in Brennan's mission brief. It wasn't in any brief. Catherine Reeves had been a ghost for 6 years, the kind of operator whose existence was confirmed by absence, by problems that solved themselves, by enemy commanders who stopped breathing without explanation. She'd learned long ago that recognition was a liability. Medals drew attention. Attention drew bureaucracy. Bureaucracy got you pulled from the field and parked behind a desk, so she'd let them forget her. The Barrett in her hands had never appeared in an official inventory. She'd acquired it through channels that didn't keep records, modified it with parts that didn't have paper trails. The stock was wrapped in weathered tape. The scope had been hand-calibrated to her eyes specifically. The weapon was anonymous, illegal, and absolutely reliable. The number 3,247 wasn't a boast, it was a reminder. She'd made that shot once before, in conditions nearly identical to these. Syrian desert, 2 years ago. Target was an ISIS commander coordinating attacks from a compound in Raqqa. Standard protocol said the shot was impossible too far. Too much wind shear, too many variables. Catherine had made variables into data points. She'd spent 16 hours on a rooftop, mapping wind patterns, measuring humidity shifts, calculating ballistic trajectories until her fingers cramped. When she fired, the bullet traveled for 7 seconds. 7 seconds in which physics, intuition, and years of training compressed into a single outcome. The target dropped. The compound descended into chaos. By the time they organized a response, Catherine was 40 kilometers away. The shot never made it into mission reports. The kill was attributed to drone strike. Catherine preferred it that way. The fewer people who knew what she could do, the longer she'd be allowed to keep doing it. Now, kneeling in Kharkov's ruins, she ran final checks on the Barrett. The cold helped keep the barrel stable, prevented thermal drift. Snow was a problem, but manageable. Wind was the real enemy. She heard the SEAL commander's radio chatter, his attempts to organize a retreat. Good fundamentals, but wrong strategy. You couldn't withdraw from a kill zone this tight. You had to break it. Catherine's radio crackled. Wind data, northeast at 8 knots, gusting to 12. Barometric pressure dropping. Temperature, 2 degrees Celsius. She did the math in her head. Distance to the nearest enemy commander, roughly 800 meters. Elevated position, moving target. Challenging but routine. Then she looked farther. Past the plaza, past the burning vehicles, to the office tower 3 blocks away where the real threat sat. That's where the coordination was coming from. That's where someone was watching through optics, calling shots, directing the slaughter. She estimated range, 2,900 meters. Maybe more in this weather. The numbers etched on her rifle seemed to glow. 3,247. Close enough. She watched the SEAL commander through her peripheral vision. He was staring at her, trying to decide if she was asset or liability. Catherine didn't blame him. She'd walked into his operation uninvited, unannounced, and was now preparing to take a shot he couldn't verify. She pressed her radio. "I need grid coordinates for hostile command." No response. She tried again. "Copy if you want your people to live." Finally, a different voice operations center, probably. Coordinates rattled off. Catherine input them into her rangefinder. Distance calculated, 3,104 meters. She spoke into the radio, flat and cold. "Stand by." Brennan had 15 seconds to make a call that would define the rest of his career, or end it. Let the mystery sniper shoot? Trust someone whose existence he couldn't confirm? Or stick with doctrine, pull his team back, and hope they made it 3 blocks before the kill corridor ate them alive? He chose doctrine. All units, execute withdrawal protocol. Martinez, lay smoke. Reed, cover right flank. Move on my mark. Smoke grenades popped, filling the plaza with thick gray clouds. His team moved in practiced formation, bounding overwatch, covering angles. It should have worked. The enemy had anticipated it. Brennan's point man, Petty Officer Graham, made it 4 steps before rounds chewed up the snow around him. He dove behind a concrete barrier. So did the man behind him. The smoke that should have concealed them instead funneled them exactly where the enemy wanted, into a narrow corridor between 2 buildings. A corridor with no cover. "Back! Fall back!" Brennan shouted. But the shots came from behind now too. They'd been flanked. The enemy had used the smoke as a timer, repositioning during the 30 seconds of visual disruption. Martinez went down, round through his calf. He dragged himself behind a burned-out sedan, blood trailing behind him. Brennan felt his chest tighten. He'd made the wrong call. Doctrine didn't account for enemies this prepared, this adaptive. His training had failed him, or he'd failed his training. Reed's voice cracked over radio. "Sir, we're cut off." Brennan scanned their position. They'd lost 20 meters of ground and gained nothing. Torres was still bleeding. Martinez couldn't walk. And the snow kept falling, each flake another second closer to complete disaster. He looked back at the collapsed office building. The woman hadn't moved. She was still prone, still locked on target, as if his team's chaos was happening in a different dimension. The Barrett's barrel protruded slightly past the window frame, steady despite wind that rattled loose sheet metal across the plaza. She wasn't reacting to the battle. She was above it. Brennan made the hardest admission of his life. He needed her. He keyed his radio. "Unknown shooter, this is Overwatch 1. We are executing alternate extraction. Can you provide cover fire?" For 3 seconds, nothing. Then her voice, quieter than wind. "No." Brennan's jaw clenched. "Say again?" "I don't do cover fire. I do problem removal. Give me authorization." "Authorization for what?" "To end this." Brennan looked at his team. Martinez was pale, shock setting in. Torres had stopped returning fire, conserving ammunition. They had maybe 10 minutes before hypothermia became as dangerous as bullets. "What do you need?" Brennan asked. "Nothing. Just don't move for 90 seconds. 90 seconds in a kill zone felt like 90 hours. "Copy," Brennan said. Then, to his team, "All units, hold position. Do not repeat. Do not advance." Reed's voice. "Sir, we're sitting ducks here. Hold position." The woman adjusted something on her scope. Her breath came out in small, controlled clouds. She chambered around the sound carried even across 40 meters. A deep mechanical chunk that resonated in Brennan's chest. Then, she went completely still. Not human still, stone still. Like someone had pressed pause on her existence. Brennan watched, unable to look away. The Barrett was aimed not at the plaza, not at the immediate threats, but far beyond toward the tower 3 blocks away where nothing visible was happening. She was aiming at a target Brennan couldn't see. A target 3,104 meters away. 2 years ago, Syrian desert, temperature 47 degrees Celsius. Catherine had been on that rooftop for 16 hours, and her spotter had given up 12 hours ago. "It's impossible," he'd said, packing his gear. "Even if you could calculate the drop, the wind's too variable. You'd be guessing." "I don't guess," Catherine had replied. She'd watched the compound through her scope, mapping every detail. The commander appeared 3 times daily, morning, noon, evening, to survey his territory from a balcony. 30 seconds of exposure, maximum. The distance was 3,247 meters, nearly 2 miles, at the absolute edge of the Barrett's effective range. Standard military doctrine said anything past 2,000 meters was luck, not skill. Catherine didn't believe in luck. She believed in math. She'd measured wind using desert sand patterns, calculated humidity by observing distant mirages, tracked the sun's path to predict thermal updrafts. She'd turned the desert into a giant laboratory, and her bullet would be the experiment. When the commander stepped onto the balcony that evening, Catherine's finger was already applying pressure to the trigger. She exhaled, squeezed. The Barrett roared. The recoil drove into her shoulder 30 pounds of metal, transferring energy through her body. The muzzle blast sent sand spraying in all directions. For 7 seconds, the bullet flew. It arced over dunes, over roads, over reality itself. It dropped 16 feet from gravity. Wind pushed it 3 feet left. Air resistance slowed it from 2,800 feet per second to just under 1,900. The bullet arrived before the sound did. The commander's head snapped back. He crumpled. By the time his guards heard the distant crack of the shot, Catherine was already packing up. The mission report listed cause of death as drone strike. Catherine never corrected the record. She'd carved 3,247 into her rifle's stock as a private memorial not to the kill, but to the variables she'd mastered. Now, in Kharkov, those same variables were presenting themselves. Wind, northeast, variable. Snow, obscuring visibility, dampening sound. Temperature, cold enough to keep the barrel stable. Distance, slightly shorter than Syria, but conditions worse. Through her scope, Catherine could barely see the target, a figure in the tower window, coordinates confirmed by command. Whoever they were directing the ambush, calling shots, reading the battlefield like a chess match. They'd made one mistake. They'd assumed no one could reach them from here. Catherine's radio crackled. Unknown shooter. This is Task Force Operations. Target is confirmed hostile commander. You are authorized to engage. She didn't acknowledge. Words were wasted breath. Her finger rested on the trigger. She'd already done the calculations. Wind at 9 knots, gusting northeast. Snowfall reducing visibility by 30%. Temperature steady. Her own heartbeat, 58 beats per minute, dropping to 54 as she controlled her breathing. The target moved, just slightly. Adjusting binoculars, probably watching the SEAL team struggle in the plaza. Catherine's crosshairs tracked the movement. She didn't lead the target at this distance. The bullet's flight time meant leading was intuition, not math. She aimed for where physics said the bullet would meet flesh. She thought about the Syrian desert, about 16 hours of patience, about a 7-second flight that defied doctrine. She thought about the SEAL team below, bleeding into snow, trusting someone they didn't know to do something they couldn't verify. Then she stopped thinking. Her world compressed to scope, reticle, wind direction, breath control. The Barrett became an extension of her nervous system. The trigger was a question she'd been asking for 2 years. Could she do it again? She exhaled one final time. The plaza went silent. Not actually silent, bullets still cracked, wind still howled, but in Catherine's perception, everything stopped. She spoke into her radio, calm as morning. Firing. Then she squeezed. The Barrett roared. The sound was apocalyptic, a deep, concussive blast that rattled windows 3 blocks away. Snow lifted from rooftops. SEALs flinched despite themselves. The rifle's recoil drove Catherine back 6 inches. She absorbed it, stayed on scope, tracking. The bullet left the muzzle at 2,799 feet per second. It immediately began losing velocity, fighting air resistance, gravity, wind. The 50 BMG round weighed 661 grains, roughly 1.5 ounces of copper-jacketed lead traveling faster than sound. For the first second, it flew straight. For the second, gravity began its pull. By the third second, wind had deflected it 2 feet northeast. Catherine didn't see any of this. She watched through her scope, crosshairs steady. The target, in the distant tower, was still adjusting binoculars, still alive, still coordinating. 4 seconds. The bullet had traveled 1,200 meters. It dropped 9 feet from its initial trajectory. 5 seconds. Wind gusted, pushing harder. The bullet corrected its path, arcing. 6 seconds. In the tower, the hostile commander lowered his binoculars and turned to speak to someone beside him. 7 seconds. The bullet arrived. It punched through the tower window's safety glass that shattered into crystalline fragments. The round continued through. Energy barely diminished. It struck the commander's chest slightly left of center, exactly where Catherine had aimed to account for wind drift. The impact transferred 13,000 foot-pounds of energy in a microsecond. The commander's body lifted off the ground, slammed against the wall behind him, and crumpled. Catherine watched him drop. Confirmed. In the plaza, nothing changed immediately. Enemy fire continued. SEALs stayed pinned. Then, 5 seconds later, the enemy radio chatter spiked, panicked, confused. The hostile shooters weren't receiving orders anymore. Coordination dissolved into chaos. A sniper in the western building abandoned his position, falling back. Another hesitated, scanning for threats he couldn't identify. The ambush was decapitating in real time. Brennan saw the shift before he understood it. Enemy fire became erratic, unfocused. Gaps appeared in their coverage. "Chief," he shouted, "West side opening." Martinez, wounded leg and all, returned fire. Graham pushed forward 10 meters, secured a better position. The entire team moved as one, exploiting the 30 seconds of confusion Catherine had created. Brennan looked back at her building. She was already chambering another round, the Barrett's bolt action smooth and practiced. Brass casing ejected, spinning through the air, landing in snow with a soft hiss. She found her next target in 4 seconds. Hostile spotter, northeast building, 2nd floor. He was trying to re-establish communications, waving frantically at other positions. Catherine fired again. Another roar. Another recoil. Another 7-second flight. This distance was shorter, only 1,100 meters. Easier mathematics. The bullet hit before the target knew death was coming. The spotter collapsed backward, radio tumbling from his hands. Now, the enemy was bleeding coordination. Without command, without spotters, their carefully constructed kill zone became a liability. They were exposed in elevated positions with no one directing their retreat. Brennan's team capitalized. Reed and Graham pushed to a new building, securing the eastern flank. Torres, despite his wounded shoulder, provided covering fire. Martinez hobbled forward, refusing to be left behind. The plaza that had been a death trap 10 minutes ago became navigable. Not safe, bullets still flew, danger still lurked, but the noose had loosened. Catherine watched through her scope, calm as ice. She wasn't done. Her training had taught her that decapitation strikes only worked if you removed every head. There were still 3 hostile positions coordinating independently. She found the third target, machine gunner on a rooftop, 890 meters, firing down at the SEAL team's right flank. She didn't announce this shot, just fired. The Barrett roared a third time. The machine gunner slumped over his weapon. The gun went silent. 3 shots, 3 kills, 3 enemy positions neutered in 90 seconds. Brennan's radio crackled. Overwatch 1, this is Hawk 6. We're seeing enemy retreat. Whoever your guardian angel is, she just saved your entire team. Brennan looked at Catherine's building. She was reloading. The enemy wasn't stupid. Whoever was second in command figured it out fast. They'd lost coordination because someone was killing their leadership from impossible distances, which meant a sniper, which meant a position that could see the entire battlefield. There were only 3 buildings with that vantage. One was burning, one had collapsed, and one, the office complex 40 meters from the SEAL team, was still standing. Catherine saw it coming before they fired. She watched through her scope as enemy forces repositioned, not toward the SEALs, toward her. Her radio crackled. Unknown shooter, you've been made. Recommend immediate displacement. She didn't respond. Displacing meant losing her sightlines, losing her ability to protect the team below. The Barrett wasn't a weapon you could pack up and sprint with. It required setup, calibration, time she didn't have. The first mortar round hit 2 floors below her position. The building shuddered. Dust and debris exploded upward. Catherine stayed prone, stayed on scope. Second round hit closer, same floor, eastern wing. Shockwave rattled her teeth. Third round punched through the floor directly beneath her. The room dropped 6 inches as support beams cracked. Catherine wrote it down, Barrett steady, breathing controlled. Her radio, unknown, you need to move now. She finally spoke, voice flat. I move. Your team dies. How many mortars do they have? Pause. Then estimate 4 tubes. Fire rate, 1 round every 30 seconds. Catherine did the math. She had maybe 90 seconds before this building became rubble. 90 seconds to eliminate the mortar teams or permanently relocate. She chose elimination. Through her scope, she scanned for mortar positions. Found the first team, 3 men loading rounds, 1,400 meters northwest. Exposed on a rooftop, confident in their range advantage. Catherine put the crosshairs on the gunner. Fired. The Barrett's roar mixed with another mortar impact, this one 5 meters from her position. The window frame collapsed. Snow poured in. Her round hit the mortar gunner's center mass. He dropped. The crew scattered. 1 mortar team down, 3 to go. Catherine shifted aim, scanning frantically. Every second cost her structural stability. The floor beneath her groaned, cracked spiderwebbing across concrete. Found the second team, 1,650 meters, partially concealed behind a low wall. She could see the mortar tube's silhouette. Aimed for the tube itself. If she couldn't kill the crew, she'd kill the weapon. Fired. The bullet struck the mortar tube's base, ricocheted, and detonated a nearby ammunition crate. Secondary explosion bloomed orange against gray snow. The crew dove for cover. 2 down. Another mortar round hit, this time the wall beside Catherine. The Barrett's bipod legs slid across the floor as the room tilted 15 degrees. She caught the rifle before it could tumble. Repositioned. Found new footing. Her hands were bleeding. She didn't know from what, didn't care. Through her scope. 3rd Mortar Team, 1,800 meters. They were adjusting their aim, preparing the killing shot that would bring this building down completely. Catherine lined up the shot. Exhaled. A voice shouted behind her. "Ma'am, we need to go." She glanced back. A SEAL looked like Lieutenant Reed had climbed the stairs to her position, rifle up, eyes wide. "Extraction window is closing," he said. "Building won't last another hit." Catherine looked back through her scope. The mortar team was loading their round. "Get clear," she said. "Not leaving you. You're blocking my shot." Reed hesitated. Then, training overriding instinct, he moved left, out of her sightline. Catherine fired. The bullet found the lead mortar operator. He collapsed backward into the tube, knocking it off angle. The round fired wild, detonating harmlessly in an empty street. 3 down. Catherine stood, grabbed the Barrett, turned to Reed. "Now we go." They made it to the ground floor as the building's upper levels began final collapse. Steel groaned like a dying animal. Reed led Catherine through rubble, toward the SEAL team's consolidated position. Brennan met them at the perimeter. "Good timing. We've got maybe 20 minutes before reinforcements show up. Then we finish this," Catherine said. Brennan looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Her face was cut, bleeding. Her jacket was torn, but her eyes were absolutely clear, focused. "Finish what?" he asked. "There's a 4th command post, 3 kilometers east. That's where the real coordination is coming from." 3 kilometers? Brennan pulled out his tactical map. "That's beyond effective." He stopped, looked at the number on her rifle stock. 3,247. "You can't be serious," he said. "Wind data," Catherine replied, ignoring his skepticism. Now, Reed, who'd followed her from the collapse, spoke up. "Ma'am, we can call in an airstrike, wait for the weather to clear. By then, they'll have relocated. Or brought heavier weapons. Or both." Catherine set up the Barrett on a low concrete wall, the only stable position in the plaza. "This ends now." Brennan's radio operator rattled off meteorological data. Wind northeast, gusting 14 knots. Visibility 400 meters. Barometric pressure falling. Temperature dropping. Worst conditions Catherine had ever attempted a shot in. Worse than Syria. The snow alone reduced visibility to nearly 0 at extreme range. Wind was inconsistent, swirling through the city's ruins. Temperature differential between her position and target would create air density variations she could only estimate. Her rangefinder read, dry 112 meters. Longer than Syria. In worse conditions. Catherine made her calculations. Bullet drop at this range would be approximately 70 feet. Wind deflection impossible to measure accurately. She'd have to trust intuition built over 1,000 shots. Snow would slow the bullet marginally, maybe 40 feet per second over the distance. The target was a window in a partially destroyed communications building. Intelligence said enemy command was operating from there. She couldn't see the building, just coordinates on a map and a grid reference in her scope. She'd be firing at a target she couldn't verify, in conditions that made the shot theoretical, at a range that defied every standard in modern sniping. Martinez, lying nearby with his wounded leg bandaged, said what everyone was thinking. "This is impossible." Catherine loaded a round. Impossible's just uncalculated. She settled into position. The snow fell harder, as if nature itself was rejecting the attempt. Her scope showed nothing but white static past 400 meters. This wasn't sniping. This was faith in mathematics. She adjusted her scope based on pure data, no visual confirmation, no tracer rounds to calibrate, no spotter to confirm wind speed. Just numbers, training, and a memory of 3,247 meters in the desert. Brennan watched her breathing slow, watched her become that statue stillness again. He'd seen snipers work before, but this was different. She wasn't aiming at a target. She was aiming at a point in space where physics promised a target would be. Catherine's finger touched the trigger. She ran final calculations in her head. Adjusted 1 mil, right for wind. Half mil down for snow drag. The Barrett was aimed at empty sky, at nothing visible, at coordinates that existed only as numbers. She whispered into her radio. Firing. The Barrett roared one last time. The bullet left the barrel. It began its impossible journey through snow, through wind, through 3 kilometers of air that wanted to drag it down, push it aside, make it fail. 10 seconds of flight time. 10 seconds where the bullet was pure potential energy, where success and failure existed in superposition. In the plaza, everyone watched Catherine. Not the target, they couldn't see it. They watched her face, searching for confirmation that couldn't possibly come for another several seconds. Catherine stayed on scope, counting, breathing. 10 seconds felt eternal. The radio sparked first. Enemy communications erupted in chaos, shouting, contradictory orders, panic. Brennan's intelligence operator translated in real time. They're saying command is down. Someone's calling for immediate evacuation. Brennan looked at Catherine. Did you? Confirmed, she said, still on scope. Through the snow and distance, she'd caught the briefest thermal bloom, a heat signature changing, a window going dark, target neutralized. The plaza went quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then, the remaining enemy forces broke. Not organized retreat panic. Brennan watched through his optics as hostile positions emptied, shooters abandoning weapons, vehicles speeding away from the city center. The kill zone that had trapped his team for 90 minutes dissolved in 90 seconds. All units, advance, Brennan ordered. His team moved forward, securing positions that had been death sentences minutes earlier. Torres cleared the western building. Martinez, leg wound and all, hobbled to cover the plaza's north entrance. Graham's voice over radio. Multiple enemy wounded surrendering, no resistance. Brennan couldn't quite process it. They'd been minutes from total failure, from calling in suicide extraction protocols, from writing letters to families. Now, the battlefield belonged to them. A helicopter's rotors beat through the snowstorm, distant but approaching. Extraction was possible now. The LZ that had been under fire was clear. Reed approached Catherine, who was methodically cleaning the Barrett, despite the wind, despite the cold, despite having just made a shot that would redefine military sniping if anyone ever learned about it. Ma'am, Reed said, that was the most incredible. It was math, Catherine interrupted. Math doesn't need compliments. But Brennan saw her hands. They were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. She'd held that stillness through impossible pressure, and now that it was over, her body was sending her the bill. Martinez called out, "Casualties, 2 wounded, no Kia. Torres and I need medical, but we're mobile." Brennan felt relief wash through him like cold water. His entire team intact. Against impossible odds, against expert enemy tactics, they'd survived. Because of her. The helicopter touched down in the plaza, snow swirling in rotor wash. Medics jumped out, running toward Torres and Martinez. Brennan turned to Catherine. "We need to debrief. I need to know who you." She was already walking away, Barrett slung over her shoulder, moving toward a side street that led away from the extraction point. "Wait," Brennan called. "You're not coming with us?" Catherine stopped, looked back. Her face was unreadable behind snow and blood. "I was never here, Commander. That's not how this works. You saved my team. That goes in the report. You get recognition." "I don't want recognition. Recognition gets people killed." She turned away, kept walking. Brennan watched her disappear into the snow. He wanted to order his team to follow her, to demand answers, to make sense of what had just happened. Instead, he let her go. Some weapons were never meant to be documented. The medical tent smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee. Brennan sat while a corpsman stitched a laceration on his forearm he hadn't noticed getting. Torres was 2 cots over, shoulder properly bandaged now, talking quietly with Martinez about the shot nobody could verify. 3 kilometers, Torres said. "That's not even in the textbooks." "It's in hers," Martinez replied. The debrief started at 1,900 hours. Brennan sat across from a colonel he'd never met, someone from Joint Special Operations Command, someone whose name badge was conspicuously turned backward. "Walk me through the engagement," the colonel said. Brennan did. Every detail except one. He never mentioned Catherine by name because he didn't know her name. He described her as attached support personnel, gave her actions, her shots, the results. The colonel listened without interrupting. When Brennan finished, he tapped his tablet. "This support personnel, did she identify herself?" No, sir. Did she show credentials? Orders? Any documentation? No, sir. And you allowed her to operate with your team anyway. It wasn't a question. Brennan felt the trap closing. Given the tactical situation, I made the judgment that her capabilities outweighed protocol concerns. The colonel nodded slowly. That judgment saved 8 American lives. Officially. He emphasized the last word. Unofficially, this conversation didn't happen. Your after-action report will state that enemy command was neutralized by coordinated team fire. No mention of individual shooters, no mention of extreme-range engagements. Understood? Brennan understood perfectly. Catherine was being erased from the record. By command, probably at her request. Understood, sir. Good. Because if you were to mention certain details, certain impossible details, it would raise questions about what assets are operating in theater. Questions that are bad for operational security. After the colonel left, Reed found Brennan outside the tent, staring at the snow that was finally stopping. Sir, about what happened back there. We followed protocol, Brennan interrupted. We took fire. We returned fire. We secured the objective. That's what happened. Reed got the message. Copy, sir. But that night, in the quiet moments before sleep, Brennan's team traded whispers. They knew what they'd seen. They knew what was possible, and what was legend, and which line had been crossed. Torres started it. Anyone else see that number on her rifle? 3,247? Metric, Martinez said. Had to be meters. No one makes that shot. Physics doesn't allow it. Physics allowed it today. The whispers spread. Not formal reports, but the kind of stories soldiers tell when officers aren't listening. Stories that grow with each retelling, that turn facts into folklore. Within a week, other teams were asking about the ghost sniper of Kharkov. The woman who didn't exist but somehow saved an entire SEAL team with 3 impossible shots. Within a month, the number 3,247 started appearing in shooting range conversations, in sniper school debates, in online forums where operators traded rumors. No one had video, no one had photos, just a number and a story. Brennan never tried to find Catherine. He understood why she'd vanished. Some people were too valuable to be visible. Some weapons were too dangerous to acknowledge. But he kept one thing, a brass casing he'd found in the collapsed office building. 50 BMG, pristine, fired once. He kept it in his desk drawer, a reminder that legends sometimes saved your life. 6 months later, Kharkov was abandoned again. The war had moved elsewhere, leaving the city to winter and ghosts. Snow fell on the plaza where Brennan's team had nearly died. It filled craters, covered bloodstains, erased the evidence of violence. The building stood empty. The office complex Catherine had shot from was finally condemned, too damaged to salvage. No memorial marked the battle. No plaque explained what had happened. The official record listed it as a minor engagement with limited hostile contact. Enemy casualties, 12. SEAL casualties, 0. The truth was buried under classification stamps and need-to-know restrictions. But stories don't need official records to survive. In Fort Bragg, a sniper instructor teaching advanced long-range techniques paused his lecture. Class, I'm going to tell you something off the record. Someone, somewhere, made a 3,200-meter shot in combat conditions. Weather was terrible. Visibility 0. Target was moving. The students laughed. Sir, that's impossible. I know, the instructor said. But it happened anyway. In Langley, an analyst reviewing battlefield reports noticed an anomaly. Enemy commanders dying at impossible ranges in multiple theaters over the past 6 years. No pattern, no signature, just results. She started a file labeled Ghost Operator. 3 weeks later, her supervisor deleted the file and told her to focus on confirmed threats, not conspiracy theories. In San Diego, Lieutenant Commander Jake Brennan stood before a weapons locker in the SEAL Team Armory. Inside was a Barrett M82A1, standard issue, perfectly maintained. He stared at the number on the stock, different from Catherine's, just a serial number, and wondered where she was now. What battlefield? What impossible shot? He'd submitted a commendation for her. It had been returned with a note, individual not found in personnel database. She didn't exist. Officially, But Reed, now a chief petty officer, told the story to new team members. Martinez told it at the bar. Torres told it to his wife, who was a military journalist, who almost wrote an article before her editor killed it for lack of verifiable sources. The story spread like snowfall, silent, accumulating, impossible to stop. Somewhere, Catherine loaded a Barrett into a nondescript case. She was leaving Kiev, heading to wherever the next crisis was brewing. Her rifle's stock still bore the number 3,247, reminder of the first impossible shot. She'd added a new number below it, 3,112. Kharkov's distance, not a trophy. A data point. Proof that physics bent to those who understood it deeply enough. Her phone buzzed encrypted message. No sender ID, just coordinates and a date. Another mission, another battlefield where someone needed problems removed from extreme range. Catherine checked her equipment. Ammunition, optics, weather instruments, everything calibrated, everything ready. She didn't think about recognition or medals, didn't care about stories being told in bars and barracks. Those things were for people who needed validation. She had her work, she had her rifle, she had mathematics, and the next impossible shot. The snow kept falling, the legends kept growing. And somewhere in the margins of classified reports, a number appeared again and again, 3,247. The shot that couldn't be made. That kept being made anyway, by someone who didn't exist.